I always believed my husband and my younger sister only shared polite conversations during family gatherings, until I discovered months of late-night calls, secret photos, and hidden jokes that made me realize they had been far closer than I had ever imagined possible. I'm writing this at 3 a.m. because sleep doesn't come anymore, and I need somewhere to put this before it kills me completely. 6 months ago, I thought I had everything. A husband who brought me coffee every morning, a sister who texted me daily, 2 kids who still believe their mom hung the moon. Tonight I'm sitting in a studio apartment that smells like other people's disappointments, and my children won't even look at me. The worst part isn't that they betrayed me. It's that I handed them the knife. It started innocently enough, or at least that's what I told myself when I began flirting with Marcus from my office. David, my husband of 8 years, had been working 60-hour weeks to pay for our dream house. Emma, my sister, had been staying with us for 3 months after her breakup, helping with the kids while I worked part-time. We were this perfect little family unit, or so I thought. Marcus was everything David wasn't at that moment. Available. Exciting. He actually listened when I complained about feeling invisible in my own life. While David collapsed into bed every night too exhausted to notice I'd bought new lingerie, Marcus would send me these long texts about how beautiful and intelligent I was. How any man would be lucky to have me. The first time Marcus kissed me in the supply closet, I told myself it was just a kiss. Just a moment of feeling wanted again. The second time, I convinced myself David would never know, and what he didn't know couldn't him. By the third time, I was already planning when we could meet at the hotel downtown. I became a master of deception. Fake work meetings. Fake girls' nights. I even had Emma watch the kids while I was out destroying their family, and she would just smile and say she loved spending time with her niece and nephew. God, the irony makes me sick now. For 2 months, I lived this double life. Marcus made me feel alive again, desired, like I was more than just a wife and mother going through the motions. I started buying new clothes, getting my hair done, actually caring about my appearance again. David noticed and complimented me, said he loved seeing me happy. I smiled and kissed him, tasting my own lies. But secrets have weight, and mine was crushing me. I started getting sloppy. Leaving my phone face up. Coming home with that satisfied glow that's impossible to hide. Taking longer and longer showers to wash off the guilt that clung to my skin like smoke. The night everything unraveled started like any other. David was working late again. Emma was helping the kids with homework while I cooked dinner. We were laughing about something silly our 7-year-old had said at school, and for a moment, I felt guilty about what I was throwing away. This beautiful, imperfect life that so many people would for. That's when I heard it. Emma's phone buzzing with a text, and she quickly flipped it over, but not before I caught a glimpse of a name that made my freeze, David. "Who's texting you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Emma's face went crimson. "Just work stuff." But it was 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. Emma worked at a yoga studio that closed at 7. I knew because I used to go to her classes before my life became a series of lies in hotel rooms. Something cold settled in my stomach. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, hands shaking as I tried to process what I'd seen. David was supposed to be at the office. Why would he be texting my sister? And why did she look like she'd been caught stealing? I came back to the kitchen with a smile plastered on my face and announced I was running to the store for milk. Emma offered to come with me, but I said no, I needed the air. What I needed was answers. Instead of going to the store, I drove to David's office. His car wasn't there. The building was dark except for the security lights. My husband, who I thought was drowning in work deadlines, was somewhere else entirely. I sat in that empty parking lot and called him. It went straight to voicemail. Then I called the office landline, knowing he'd answer if he was really there working late. It rang and rang. The drive home felt like swimming through concrete. Every red light stretched into eternity. Every possible explanation I invented crumbled under the weight of what I already knew but couldn't admit. I found Emma in the living room, curled up on our couch like she belonged there, like she was more at home in my house than I was. The kids were in bed. She looked up when I walked in, and her expression was pure guilt. "Where's the milk?" she asked, and her voice cracked on such a simple question. "Forgot my wallet," I lied, and we both knew I was lying. "Where's David?" "Still at work, I assume." But her phone was buzzing again, face down on the coffee table. I could see the light bleeding around the edges. "Can you check that? Might be important." Emma's hand shot out to grab the phone so fast she knocked over her water glass. "It's nothing. Probably just spam." That's when I knew. Not suspected. Knew. My sister was hiding something about my husband, and the weight of my own secrets made it impossible to demand the truth. How do you accuse someone else of betrayal when you're drowning in your own? I went to bed that night listening for David's car in the driveway. He didn't come home until almost midnight, smelling like Emma's perfume and carrying the same guilt I'd been wearing like a second skin for months. The next morning, while David showered and Emma slept in the guest room, I did something I'd never done before. I went through my husband's phone. What I found there burned through me like acid. Months of messages. Photos I'd never seen. Inside jokes about things that happened in our house while I was at work or with Marcus. Plans for lunch dates, dinner dates, weekend trips that I thought were work conferences. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone when I saw the message from last night. She almost caught us texting. We need to be more careful. Emma's response, I know. I felt terrible lying to her face. But I can't stop thinking about you. David, same. This is me, but I can't help myself. You're all I think about. Emma, what are we going to do about her? David, I don't know. She seems happy lately, distracted. Maybe that's better for everyone. Happy. Distracted. Because I was cheating on him while he was cheating on me with my own sister. I screenshot everything before my shaking fingers could delete something by accident. Message after message of them planning their secret relationship, discussing me like I was an obstacle to work around instead of a human being they were destroying. There were photos too. Emma in lingerie I helped her pick out. David shirtless in what looked like a hotel room. Intimate selfies taken in places I recognized, our bedroom when I was at work, our kitchen during the kids' nap time, our backyard during a barbecue where I've been laughing and taking pictures of them being such good friends. But the worst part was reading how they talked about me. Not with hatred or even guilt, but with pity. Like I was this sad, clueless wife who couldn't keep her husband interested. Like I deserved what was happening because I was boring, because I'd let myself go, because I was too focused on the kids and the house to notice my marriage was dying. She used to be so fun, David had written. Now it's like living with a stranger. Emma replied, you deserve someone who sees you. Really sees you. I saw him now. I saw them both. The phone slipped from my hands and clattered on the bathroom floor. David called out from the shower, asking if I was okay. I managed to croak out that I'd just dropped something, but my voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. I picked up his phone with steady hands now, took pictures of everything with my own phone, and put it back exactly where I'd found it. Then I walked downstairs to where Emma was making coffee in my kitchen, humming like she didn't have a care in the world. Good morning, she said brightly, and kissed my cheek like she'd done 1,000 times before. Like she hadn't been planning how to steal my entire life. Morning, I managed, and poured myself coffee with hands that no longer shook. Sleep well? Like a baby. She smiled that same sweet smile that had comforted me through every heartbreak, every disappointment, every moment when I'd needed my little sister most. I smiled back and asked if she wanted eggs for breakfast. We stood there in my kitchen, making small talk about our plans for the day, both of us hiding secrets that would destroy everything we'd ever been to each other. But here's the thing about secrets, they're only powerful when everyone's keeping them. And I was done keeping mine. I didn't confront them immediately. That would have been the honest thing to do, and I'd forgotten how to be honest somewhere between Marcus's hotel room and Emma's lies in my kitchen. Instead, I did something that still makes me sick to think about. I used my own infidelity as a weapon. The next 2 weeks were the most twisted performance of my life. I played the perfect wife and sister while gathering evidence and planning my revenge. Every smile felt like broken glass in my mouth. Every family dinner was a stage where we all performed our roles, David the devoted husband, Emma the supportive sister, me the clueless wife. But I wasn't clueless anymore. I was calculating. I hired a private investigator with money I withdrew from our savings account, telling David the first needed it for a surprise birthday party for Emma. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was spending our money to document how they were destroying our family, and David smiled and said it was sweet how much I loved my sister. The pie's photos were devastating. David and Emma at restaurants I'd never been to, holding hands across tables while I was at home with our children. Emma wearing the dress I'd bought her for Christmas, David's hand on her thigh in the front seat of his car. They looked happy. Not guilty or conflicted or torn apart by what they were doing to me. Just happy. Meanwhile, I continued my affair with Marcus, but now it felt different. Mechanical. I was using him the same way David and Emma were using me, as an escape from a reality that had become unbearable. Marcus started asking questions about why I seemed distant, if everything was okay at home. I told him my marriage was fine, which was probably the only honest thing I'd said in months. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning. David announced he was going golfing with his boss, something he did maybe twice a year. Emma said she was meeting college friends for brunch, which should have been my first clue since Emma had been a loner in college who barely kept in touch with anyone. I smiled and waved them off, then spent an hour getting the kids ready for what I told them was a fun surprise adventure. We drove to the hotel where the Pi had photographed David's car 3 times that week. Sure enough, there it was in the parking lot, right next to Emma's Honda. My 5-year-old asked why we were sitting in a hotel parking lot instead of going to the zoo like I'd promised. I told him we were waiting for someone, which was true. I was waiting for my courage to catch up with my rage. I left the kids in the car with an iPad and snacks, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and used the spare key I'd stolen from Emma's purse to let myself into room 412. The Pi had told me the room number, said they'd been meeting there every Tuesday and Saturday for 6 weeks. I opened that door expecting to catch them in bed together, ready to scream and throw things and finally release all that had been building inside me. Instead, I found something worse. They were just talking. Sitting on the bed fully clothed, Emma crying, David holding her hands and wiping her tears with the kind of tenderness he used to show me. They looked up when I walked in, and the expression on their faces wasn't surprise or guilt. It was relief. "Thank God," Emma whispered. "We've been trying to figure out how to tell you." David stood up, and I could see he'd been crying too. We never meant for this to happen. We fought it for months. I stood there in that hotel room doorway, my children waiting in the car below, my lover's number in my phone, my private investigator's photos in my purse, and I realized they thought I was there to give them my blessing. They thought I'd figured it out and come to have some mature conversation about how to handle this situation with minimal damage to everyone involved. They had no idea I'd been cheating too. No idea I had evidence that could destroy them both. No idea I'd brought our kids to witness their parents' marriage in a hotel room that smelled like industrial cleaning supplies and other people's mistakes. "How long?" I asked, and my voice sounded stranger to me than it had in the bathroom 2 weeks ago. 4 months, David said. "Since right after she moved in with us." 4 months. I'd been cheating for 2. They'd gotten a head start on destroying our family. "We fell in love," Emma said, like that explained anything. Like love was some natural disaster that had just happened to them instead of a choice they'd made every day for 4 months. I started laughing. Not because anything was funny, but because the alternative was screaming, and I could hear my kids singing along to Moana in the car 4 floors below. "You fell in love," I repeated. "We know how this looks," David said, stepping toward me like I was a wild animal he needed to calm down. "But we've been miserable keeping this secret. We want to do right by you, by the kids. We want to handle this like adults." Like adults. As if there was a mature, responsible way to handle your husband leaving you for your sister. As if there was a way to explain to a 5-year-old and 7-year-old that Daddy loves Aunt Emma more than Mommy now, and that's why everything they've ever known is gone. "Where do you think the kids and I should live?" I asked. "Since you want the house, I assume. For your new family?" They exchanged a look. They'd already discussed this. Already planned out how to dispose of the inconvenient wife and her children. "We haven't gotten that far," David lied. "But you've gotten far enough to book hotel rooms and lie to my face for months." Emma started crying again. "We never wanted to you. You have to believe that." I walked over to the window and looked down at my children in the car. My daughter was sharing her goldfish crackers with her little brother, both of them still believing their mom was planning something fun for them. Still believing their family was solid and safe and permanent. "I need time to think," I said. "Of course," David said quickly. "Take all the time you need. We can figure out counseling, or mediation, or whatever you think is best." Counseling. Like there was a therapy technique for your husband and sister have been having an affair under your roof while you watch their children. I drove home in complete silence. The kids kept asking about the zoo, about the surprise, about why Mommy looked sad. I told them we'd do something fun tomorrow, which we would. We'd do something fun every day for the next month, because after that, fun would be a luxury we couldn't afford. That night, David slept in the guest room without me asking him to. Emma had disappeared to give us space to talk, which I later learned meant she was at David's brother's house, calling everyone in our family to give them her version of events before I could tell them the truth. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, and made a decision that I knew would destroy everything but couldn't stop myself from making anyway. I was going to up their carefully planned conversation. I was going to make sure their love story became a cautionary tale. And I was going to use my own affair to make sure the explosion took down everything in its path, including me. The next morning, I called Marcus. "I need to see you," I said. "Today. It's important." "Are you okay? You sound strange." "Meet me at our usual place. 1 o'clock. I dropped the kids at my mother's house, telling her I needed a few hours to handle something important. She must have seen something in my face, because she hugged me tighter than usual and told me to call if I needed anything. At the hotel, I did something I'd never done before. I took selfies with Marcus. In bed, both of us obviously posed, both of us smiling. I made sure the hotel room was clearly visible in the background, made sure the timestamp was clear, made sure anyone who saw these photos would know exactly what they were looking at and when they were taken. Marcus asked what the photos were for, and I told him I was thinking of leaving my husband. Which was true, just not in the way he thought. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" he asked, stroking my hair like I was something fragile. "Divorce is messy. Especially with kids." "I'm sure," I said, and took a few more photos just to be safe. That evening, David and Emma sat me down for the talk. They'd clearly rehearsed. David spoke about how they tried to fight their feelings, how guilty they felt, how much they respected me and wanted to minimize the damage to our family. Emma talked about how she'd move out immediately, how they'd wait a respectful amount of time before making their relationship public, how they'd make sure the kids felt loved and supported through the transition. They had it all figured out. The mature way to handle their affair. The responsible approach to destroying a marriage and breaking up a family. I listened to their whole speech. Nodded at appropriate moments. Asked a few practical questions about custody and finances that made them think I was handling this better than they'd hoped. Then I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos I'd taken 6 hours earlier. "I've been having an affair too," I said. "For 2 months. His name is Marcus. He works in my office. These were taken today, after I found out about you too." The silence in that room was deafening. David's face went through about 6 different emotions in the space of 10 seconds. Emma just stared at the phone like it was going to bite her. "I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago," I continued. "I have photos of you two at restaurants, hotels, in our house while I was at work. I have screenshots of every text message you've sent each other since this started. I know about the weekend trips, the fake work meetings, the lies you've told our entire family." David finally found his voice. You've been cheating on me?" The hypocrisy was stunning. The pure audacity of his and anger when he'd been doing the same thing, but worse, because he'd been doing it with my sister. "For 2 months, I repeated. While you've been doing it for 4. Emma was crying again, but not the pretty tears from yesterday. These were panic tears. "This changes everything." "Yes, it does. We can work through this," David said, but he didn't sound convinced. "All of us. We can get counseling, figure out how to move forward." "No," I said. "We can't." I stood up and looked at them both, these two people I'd loved more than anyone in the world, and felt nothing but disgust. "Tomorrow morning, I'm telling our children that Mommy and Daddy are getting divorced because we both made terrible mistakes. Tomorrow afternoon, I'm calling both our families and telling them exactly what's been going on. Tomorrow evening, I'm moving in with my mother until I can find my own place. You don't have to destroy everyone," Emma whispered. "We can handle this quietly." "Quietly?" I laughed. "You mean the way you two have been handling it for 4 months?" I headed toward the door, then turned back. "Oh, and Emma? You'll need to find somewhere else to live. Tonight. I want you out of my house before the kids come home from school tomorrow." "Where am I supposed to go?" I shrugged. "Move in with David's brother. Or get your own hotel room. Or move back in with Mom and explain to her why her 2 daughters can't be in the same house anymore." I left them sitting there in our living room, planning their mature response to a situation that had spiraled completely out of their control. That night, I slept better than I had in months. I woke up the next morning and remembered that I'd lost everything. Not just David, not just Emma, but the life I'd spent 8 years building, the family I'd thought was permanent, the future I'd planned for my children. I'd blown it all up in a hotel room with photos of my own betrayal, and there was no putting it back together. The hardest part was telling the kids. They sat on the couch between David and me, still in their pajamas, while I tried to find words for the unfindable. We'd practiced this conversation in couples therapy once, back when we thought we were happy, back when infidelity was just a hypothetical scenario we might need to navigate someday. "Mommy and Daddy made some bad choices," I started, and my 7-year-old immediately knew something terrible was coming. She started crying before I finished the sentence. "Are you getting divorced like Emma's friends' parents?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart. We are." My 5-year-old didn't understand what divorce meant, so David tried to explain it in terms a kindergartner could grasp. Separate houses, different bedrooms, taking turns for holidays and birthdays. He made it sound like an adventure, like something that might actually be fun. But kids aren't. They could feel the weight of what we weren't telling them, the secret still hanging in the air like smoke. When my daughter asked where Aunt Emma was, why she wasn't here for this important family meeting, David and I just looked at each other. "Aunt Emma had to move out," I said finally. "She won't be living with us anymore." "Why not? Did she make bad choices too?" Out of the mouths of, "Yes, honey." She did. That afternoon, I started making the phone calls I'd promised. I called my parents first, then David's. I called our siblings, our close friends, my boss who would need to know why I was requesting immediate time off, and a transfer to a different department. Each conversation was its own special kind of. The shocked silence when I explained what had been happening. The questions I couldn't answer: how long had I suspected? Why didn't I say something sooner? What was I going to do now? My mother cried. David's mother hung up on me, then called back an hour later to scream that I was destroying her son's life over a mistake. My best friend Sarah drove over immediately and held me while I sobbed into her shoulder, finally letting out months of grief and rage and shame. But the worst call was to my sister Jessica, who lived across the country and had always looked up to Emma and me as examples of how sisters should be. How they could be best friends, confidants, each other's greatest supporters. "I don't understand," she kept saying. "Emma would never. You two are so close. How do you explain that closeness can become a weapon? That the person who knows all your insecurities, all your fears, all the ways your marriage has struggled, is perfectly positioned to take everything you love?" "She would and she did," I said. "And so did I. We're both terrible people who destroyed our family." "Don't say that. You're not terrible. You're human." But I didn't feel human anymore. I felt like something poisonous that everyone needed to stay away from. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers and custody arrangements and dividing up a life that had once felt permanent. David moved in with his brother temporarily. Emma disappeared completely. I heard through mutual friends that she'd driven back to our hometown to stay with college acquaintances, too ashamed to face our parents. The kids adapted the way kids do, with resilience that broke my heart. They accepted their new normal: daddy's house and mommy's apartment, different rules and bedtimes and dinner routines. They stopped asking when we were all going to live together again after the first month. But the damage was visible in smaller ways. My daughter started having nightmares and wetting the bed. My son became clingy, afraid to let me out of his sight. They both developed an obsessive need to know where I was at all times, calling my phone repeatedly if I was 5 minutes late picking them up from school. At their first counseling session, the therapist explained that children of infidelity often develop trust issues and anxiety around abandonment. They'd learned that the adults they depended on were capable of lying, of keeping devastating secrets, of choosing their own desires over their children's stability. "The good news," she said, "is that kids are resilient. With consistent support and honesty, they can heal from this." The bad news, which she didn't say but we both knew, was that some damage is permanent. My children would never again have the naive faith that families are forever. They'd learned too young that love doesn't guarantee loyalty, that the people who promise to protect you might be the ones who you most. Marcus ended our affair the week after everything exploded. He said he didn't want to be involved in all this drama, that he thought I was in an unhappy marriage, not a complicated situation involving family betrayal and custody battles. "You're too much work," he said, like I was a car that had broken down instead of a person whose life had imploded. I realized then that Marcus had never loved me. He'd loved the idea of me, the fantasy of the lonely housewife who just needed someone to appreciate her. The real me, with real problems and real consequences, was more than he'd bargained for. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Emma called me. I was in my new apartment, a cramped 2-bedroom in a complex that allowed cats because I'd gotten the kids a kitten to help with the transition. They were at David's house for the weekend, and I was sitting on my second-hand couch, eating cereal for dinner and watching reality TV. "I'm sorry," she said, like those words could rebuild everything we destroyed. "Okay," I said. "That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say, Emma? That I forgive you? That we can be sisters again? That what you did was understandable? I want you to fight for us," she whispered. "I want you to care enough to be angry." But I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires energy I didn't have. I was just tired. Tired of being the villain in everyone else's story, tired of being the victim in my own, tired of trying to figure out how to be a person again when I'd forgotten who that person was supposed to be. "I was angry," I said. "For months. It didn't change anything. David and I broke up," she said, like that was supposed to matter to me now. "Good for you. We couldn't handle the guilt. Couldn't handle what we'd done to you, to the kids. It wasn't worth it. Not worth it. 8 years of marriage, 2 children, 2 families destroyed, and it wasn't worth it. I hope you both figure out how to live with yourselves," I said, and hung up. That was 6 months ago. I haven't spoken to Emma since. David and I maintain polite contact for the kids' sake, but we're strangers now. People who once shared a bed, a mortgage, dreams for the future, and we can barely make eye contact during custody exchanges. The kids are doing better. They've accepted that this is their life now: 2 homes, separate bedrooms, holidays split between houses that both feel temporary. They've learned to pack overnight bags and remember which toys live where, and not to mention one parent while they're with the other. But sometimes I catch my daughter staring at family photos from before, the ones where we all looked happy and intact and permanent. She'll trace our faces with her finger like she's trying to remember what it felt like when all 4 of us existed in the same space, when love wasn't something that could be taken away without warning. My son asked me last week if I would ever live with Daddy again. I told him no, as gently as I could, and watched his face fall. He's 5 years old and he's learning that some things that break can't be fixed, that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most will choose to you instead. I work full-time now, in a different department where my colleagues don't know my story. I go on dates occasionally, awkward coffee meetings with men who don't know what to do with a woman who comes with this much baggage. They usually disappear after I explain why I'm divorced, why my children have trust issues, why I don't have any photos of my sister in my apartment. The loneliness is crushing sometimes. Not just the absence of a partner, but the loss of my entire support system. I can't call Emma when I have a bad day or need advice about the kids. I can't lean on David when parenting feels impossible. I burned down my marriage and my family in a single afternoon, and I have to live in the ashes. People ask if I regret it. If I wish I'd handled things differently. If I think the affair was worth destroying everything for a few months of feeling wanted. The answer is complicated. I regret the cheating, absolutely. I regret not fighting for my marriage before it was too late. I regret not seeing that Emma and David's relationship was changing, not protecting my family from the people who were supposed to love us most. But I don't regret exposing the truth. I don't regret refusing to be the understanding wife who gracefully steps aside so her husband and sister can pursue their great love story. I don't regret making sure that their betrayal had consequences, even if those consequences destroyed me too. My children will grow up knowing that actions have weight, that choices matter, that love without loyalty is just selfishness wearing a prettier name. They'll know that their mother fought back when her world fell apart, even if she fought dirty. It's not the lesson I wanted to teach them. It's not the childhood I wanted to give them. But it's the truth, and they deserve that more than they deserve comfortable lies. I'm writing this because I see posts on here all the time from people in similar situations. Wives who discover affairs and don't know how to respond. Sisters who have fallen for their siblings' husbands and think love justifies betrayal. People who believe they can manage infidelity without collateral damage. You can't. There is no clean way to destroy a family. There is no mature approach to betraying the people who trust you most. There are only degrees of devastation, and you don't get to control how much pain you cause once you decide your desires matter more than your commitments. I sit in this apartment every night, listening to my children sleep in their shared bedroom, and I know that every choice I made led us here. Not just the affair, but the lies that preceded it, the emotional distance I allowed to grow between David and me, the signs I ignored because it was easier than confronting hard truths. We're all responsible for what happened. David, Emma, and me. We all chose selfishness over sacrifice, passion over stability, temporary pleasure over permanent love. The kids are the only innocent victims in this story, and they're the ones who will carry the scars longest. I want to end this with some wisdom, some lesson learned, some hope for redemption. But the truth is messier than that. The truth is that some mistakes can't be undone, some trust can't be rebuilt, some families can't be put back together. The truth is that I wake up every morning in a bed I sleep in alone, in an apartment that will never be home, co-parenting children who deserve better with a man I once loved enough to promise forever. And the person who could have saved us all was me, years ago, before the first lie, before the first secret, before I decided that my happiness was worth more than everyone else's heartbreak. But that person is gone, and all that's left is the woman typing this at 3 a.m., hoping someone reads it and makes different choices than the ones that brought me here. The warning label on decisions should read, "Will destroy everything you think you can't live without, leaving you with nothing but the memory of who you used to be."